Here we go. So, as usual, we're going to start with a clip of our main man, Alan Moore. Here we go.
Watchmen also grew out of the politically shadowy landscape of the 1980s, when the Cold War was probably at its hottest in 20 or 30 years, and when nuclear destruction suddenly seemed a very real possibility. Watchmen used the cliches of the superhero format to try and discuss notions of power and responsibility in an increasingly complex world. We treated these fairly ridiculous superhuman characters as more human than super. We were using them as symbols of different kinds of ordinary human being rather than as different super beings. I think there were probably quite a few things about Watchmen which chimed well with the times, but to me perhaps the most important was the actual storytelling, where the world that was presented didn't really hang together in terms of linear cause and effect, but was instead seen as some massively complex simultaneous event with connections made of coincidence and synchronicity. And I think that it was this worldview, if anything, that resonated with an audience that had realised that their previous view of the world was not adequate for the complexities of this scary and shadowy new world that we were entering into. I think that Watchmen, if it offered anything, offered new possibilities as to how we perceive the environment surrounding us and the interactions and relationships of the people within it.
Now for the issue 11, Look on My Works Ye Mighty recap. Adrian Veidt watches as Night Owl and Rorschach approach his Antarctic retreat Karnak and prepares for their arrival. After pushing some buttons, Veidt retires to his vivarium in celebration with his 3 serving men. He recounts to them his journey through life, what experiences and inspirations led him on his quest to conquer the evils that beset mankind as the masked adventurer Ozymandias, while the fatal poison he had administered in his servants' drinks takes effect, quietly killing them. Back in New York, we get street corner drama when Dr. Long's estranged wife, Gloria, and Joey's ex-girlfriend, Aileen, both show up at the newsstand, each looking to connect with their significant others. Joey gets violent when Aileen tries to break it off, while Gloria tries to reunite with her husband. We also get the thrilling conclusion of our comic within a comic, Marooned, as our narrator returns home to find vengeance and instead finds himself a monster. Accepting damnation, he joins the cursed crew of the Black Freighter. After quickly dispatching Night Owl and Rorschach, Adrian further recounts all the instances that spurred him on his path, how the comedian showed him the futility of his actions as an adventurer in the face of inevitable nuclear war, how faced with humanity's mortality, Ozymandias sought to cut the Gordian knot of impending self-destruction through sacred trickery, how he killed the comedian for discovering his secret plot, and most importantly, how there ain't shit Night Owl and Rorschach can do to stop him because he already did it like 35 minutes ago, fam.
I did it 35 minutes ago.
Issue number 11, our penultimate issue to Watchmen. Just right off the bat, reading this issue, rereading this issue, when he goes and he's like, well, no time like the present, and he pads down to his little basement, and he boops the button you know? And then that's it. And he's like, okay, guys, I need you to hang out in my, meet me in my fucking glass bubble deal. You know, we're going to hang out and party. It was just like, and that was it. It's like he had this whole plot that was so big and so massive. And in the end, the final thing he had to do to enact it, all he had to do was just boop, push a button. And that was it. And he was just like, bink. Hey guys, I won. Let's go celebrate. Like, fuck, that was so good. Like, just how, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, you like that penultimate throwback, baby? I'm not going to fuck that one up again. That was a hard lesson I learned. Ugh, man, I used that word wrong in a video, and I look like a fucking idiot. It just made me want to die. It just hurts my ego every time I think about it. All right. So, okay. First, let's go to our book cam. I want to start talking about some of our first pages. So, here we go. In this page, we have Adrian. He is talking about, he mentions Burroughs' cut-up technique, which is like, okay, so Burroughs is like one of the beatnik writers, okay? Like, Burroughs is a beatnik writer. But he was like crazy, okay? Like, Burroughs was like, he was the furthest out there of all the beatniks. In my opinion, I feel like he was the furthest out there. He did a lot of heroin. He had sensory deprivation chambers. He accidentally, I think it was an accident, shot his wife in the head playing William Tell, and like he was trying to shoot an apple off her head and just shot her in the fucking head in Mexico. Totally got away with it. But anyways, this guy was super fucking wild out there with ideas, and like one of the things he would do with his cut-up technique with his writing, he was a writer, is he would take narratives and then he would like cut them up, you know, and rearrange them and break them down from like logical sense to try to create something entirely different. And yeah, and so that's what like, okay, so Adrian is inspired by the idea of this like cut up technique where it's like you see all these different narratives, little snippets that some of them go together, some of them don't, but they're rearranged in this crazy way, and like something about that does something to your brain where you're able to like get something new out of like the sum of these parts, like all these weird parts that are put together wrong, like somehow evoke some entirely new thing that is ephemeral and fleeting, but it's like vital, and it's like this truth that you can find in there. And I feel like I mean, like, and he's talking about how, like, when he's using his, you know, his crazy monitor, his TV wall monitor, where he sees all the different channels coming in, and he's just, like, taking in all this different information. You know, it's like looking at the Matrix, like, all the green shit in the Matrix. He's taking all this stuff in, and then, like, he's coming to these conclusions just by looking at the television channels, and, like, he's looking at it like it's a scrying mirror. And within the occult, there's something called a scrying mirror, where there's one method of trying to gain this altered higher state of awareness and like gain insights and information. And one way to do it is to stare into a scrying mirror, which is like, they were like, you can use a pond, and it's like a dark mirror. It has to be like a black mirror, which is hilarious because Black Mirror, we look into a black mirror every fucking day. We've got a fucking phone on us, this little black mirror that we look into all the time. And, like, I think that if Adrian Veidt was now, he would be doing that, but with the internet, you know? He'd have, like, all of his apps and shit going. Like, he'd have, like, looking at Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and looking at, like, blah, you know, all this stuff. Like, all this, like, he would get so much more information, you know, than, like, you can get from TV. And I think that, that's a really, like, that's a real technique. Like, what he's doing is something that I absolutely do in my everyday life for my job. I mean, it's like I look through all these apps and stuff, and I'm just like, whoa, like I have to kind of keep a feel on like what my audience feels like, what the internet at large feels like, because like I kind of live here on the internet, and I have to like I gotta corral you cats, I gotta herd you guys, you know. And so you look for symbols in this flood of information. You flood yourself with information, you overload yourself with information, but these certain symbols like rise to the top. And then you're like, you find these like crazy truths about the universe, which is really, really fucking cool. I really like that a lot. Also, we finally get our Gordian knot painting. There's so much Gordian knot stuff going on in this. I love it. Let's see. Oh. Yeah, here he is. I love it. He's so good. I do that shit all the time here. Ooh, just hit a button right there, guys. Just whatever. But yeah, here's our Gordian knot painting in full view for the first time, you know. And like here he is. I love it because it's over this entrance, the entrance where he goes to like boop the button that just like teleports the monster, and like it's just, oh my gosh, it's the cherry on top, the straw, you know, the little straw that broke the camel's back. But yeah, I love that this is here and showing Alexander defeating the Gordian knot by slicing it or taking the yoke out, whichever way. There's two different ways people say he does it. I like the yoke idea personally more than slicing it, because I feel like pulling the yoke is like you understand this system that this other system is tied to, and like whereas just slicing it, I don't know, I like the other one. It seems a little smarter. Whatever. Yeah, you like my black nails, guys? They're back. I did it just for you. So yeah, we have our Gordian knot painting. This comes into a lot in here. I love seeing that. If you remember, we talked in our last sessions about the Gordian knot, about how it's like all about lateral thinking, which was a big thing in the 80s. That was a big idea, like thinking outside the box, you know? Think outside the bun. I love think outside the bun. I don't say think outside the box anymore. I've degraded that term into think outside the bun, which is degraded even further into like another meme where I say like tinkle outside the binkle, which is from some other bullshit. So like, I don't know, ideas get weird. Where am I? What am I talking about? Okay, so let's keep going. So he boops this button. He's like, hey guys, we gotta go hang out, right? Well, come hang out with me. I need a party. And then we see him. He's in his vivarium. He has this crazy impossible dream, you know, going on. I mean, this guy is he just is constantly giving a middle finger to the universe, you know, like reading this comic this time around, I really came to realize how he is like Lex Luthor. This guy is Lex Luthor. His pride and his vanity, like I love him, and I don't necessarily disagree with him in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of philosophies that I absolutely agree with old Ozymandias on, which kind of scares me and makes me question myself in a lot of ways. But this dude, like, he's such a fuck you to the universe. My will is all encompassing. I can do whatever I want. So much so that he felt the need to go to fucking Antarctica, build a temple retreat for himself. He built a fortress of solitude for himself. And at his fortress of solitude, he built a fuck you to Mother Earth, this vivarium, where he has a crazy jungle that's just in the middle of the Antarctic, you know, and it's fine, and it's his, and he planted it, and he put it there because he wants it there, and he just keeps it there, and that's how much money he has, and that's how powerful he is. That's how like, this guy's so fucking power hungry. Like, look at this ridiculous place. Like, what a middle finger to the universe. I think that's really great. But in this, he starts talking about, like, you know, realizing this 2,000-year-old dream. You know, he references this 2,000-year-old dream. And what he's talking about is Alexander the Great, who you know, fucked up the Gordian knot, you know. He had a dream. Alexander had a dream. And his dream was to unite humanity. And there are certain scholars, you know, that have said that this guy desired to use empire as a means to gain peace for humanity at large, rather than just to gain personal power. You know, like, that's what's special about Alexander, and that's the story that Ozymandias believes about his hero. I mean, dude, this guy's got a huge fucking painting of his fucking hero. I mean, this guy's such a dork too. Like, he's such a dork. Like, he's surrounded. I mean, yeah, it's like, oh, it's Egyptian stuff. It's cool. But it's like, yeah, you're still, like, a dork, like, decorating your place with all your dork stuff that you get a boner for, you know? You're still a fucking dork. I don't care how cool it looks, you know? But I'm a dork, so I see that. I get that. Oh, thank you, Davey. Thank you for the cheer for the nails, yeah. So, okay. So, and that's the thing, is that's debatable. It's like, did Alexander, like, I mean, he was, you know, who knows? Who knows at the end of the day? Like, was he doing it because he really wanted to, like, have power over everyone in the world so that he can force them to stop fighting? I mean, that's very, like, I mean, that's a slippery slope, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, I mean, that's what we get into with Dune, Emperor, like God Emperor and stuff like that, which, by the way, you know, Dune Club's coming back around, just saying. But, yeah, so, I don't know, we'll talk more about that in that sort of shit in Dune Club. But yeah, I don't know. I had so much fun getting to know Adrian again. And I love that. Okay, so he's poisoned his dudes here. He poisoned his dudes, his serving men, whom he saved. They were refugees, like Viet Cong refugees, and they couldn't go to America because they were with the Viet Cong, and they ran away from the Viet Cong, and then they couldn't go home because they weren't running away from their own shit. So like, Vietnam doesn't want them, either. So he took these guys in from Vietnam, right? But the thing is like, a lot of these old school adventurer types, like there's this whole Jack London thing where a guy saves another man's life and now the other man like owes him his life. It's like, you saved my life, so now you owe me, or I owe you, is the deal. And so I think with Ozymandias, he had that idea where it's like, well, I saved these fucking guys, so you know what? Like, they owe me. They'd be dead if I didn't do this. So I've kept them alive for this long, so I can just fucking kill these dudes. And it's like, it's totally chill, Like, and the thing is, he says that he's doing all this because he really cares about humanity, but like, I think he's doing all this because he's kind of feels this way, and he really doesn't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's kind of a sociopath. Like, he's super sociopathic. So anyways, he goes through this whole thing talking about how when he was a kid and how his parents died and he was left a lot of money, and then he really got into Alexander the Great. He got a fucking boner for this dude and was like, oh, dude, I want to be this guy. He's like, this is my hero that I want to emulate. And then he goes on a little trip that's like trying to trace his hero's footsteps, goes through Egypt, does all this stuff, and at the end, I love that he has a spiritual experience at the end. I love Alan Moore shows this guy's going on a spirit quest. Okay, this is a spirit journey, all right? This guy is like, my parents are dead. I want to do some shit. What the fuck? Okay, you know what? I'm going to start at the bottom and prove to myself, that I'm going to give all my money away. And then I'm going to go retrace my fucking hero's steps all through with nothing, and survive that shit. And then at the end of it, he took some hashish that he got, and he walked into the desert, and like all these panels of him have all been in silhouette, but then when he takes the hashish and is having the moment, he's like, he's not in silhouette anymore. I love this. Like, he's enlightened now, like he's the enlightened one. He was in the dark, he was in the shadow before, but now, oh fuck. And so he has this, he goes on a spirit journey and takes some drugs, and then realizes some truths of the universe, and it is inspired and is finally put on the path. And so, but then again, you see him, he's back in shadow here, he's back in the shadow. Now he's like, oh, okay, now I'm going to be Ozymandias, but it's like, I love that this spiritual, he got fucked up. Okay, here's the thing. This guy was a rich kid. Let me tell you about Ozymandias here. This guy was a fucking rich kid. He had everything. He didn't really care when his parents died. He wasn't that bummed about it, like, because he's kind of a sociopath, and he's like, whatever. And then he's like, well, I'm a badass dude, so I'm going to go do some stuff, and then he's like, I'm going to convince myself that I'm a cool guy. So he goes out in the world, gets some experience, which is admirable. I'm down with that. But then it's like, he just like, he's a rich kid who gave away all his money and then ran around and then got on drugs and then decided to be Batman, and like put on a thing and just started like beating people up and like being crazy. But he's like, no, but my path of conquest, he was like, I'm not gonna conquest other men, I'm gonna conquest the evils that beset them, but it's like, dude, but you're still a predator. It's like, but you want to conquest people. Like, just the fact that you want to conquest people makes you tyrannical, and like, you have to question yourself, but he doesn't. He super doesn't. Like, I love it. And then, yeah, and this is just like, it just shows you the power of belief, though. He has this spiritual experience, and like, it really changes him, and it sets him on this path, and he decides to be this higher person, and like, the power of belief, it's a hell of a drug, like, it's a tool. The Chaos Magicians believe that, belief is a tool, and you can use it, and you should change your beliefs as you grow as a person. And they understand the power of them, but there's a lot of people who don't, like, they think that you're supposed to have one belief and you stick to that and the whole thing, and that's where shit gets really dangerous. The power of belief gets like really ingrained, and then it's weird. So another thing I wanted to point out is, okay, so back to New York. We're gonna go back to New York here. Back on the street corner, Joey and Eileen are talking. She's got her little top knot on, and they, this is our Promethean cabbie, and like, they've been breaking up. We saw throughout the whole comic, like, they started off cool, And then, gradually she's told the street vendor that, like, oh, my girl's breaking up with me. Like, I don't know, whatever. And then now we see the ex-girlfriend coming over, and we see this relationship, and, she's trying to break it off while, and we'll get into that later. She's trying to break it off. She's like, here, let me give you this book. It's called Knots. It's Knots. It's by this Lang guy, and it'll help you. If you read this book, I think it'll help you realize what went wrong with us, And she's just, like, not having it. Like, she's just, like, not having it. She's having a moment, because she's had this tough exterior self. She's had to be this tough to survive because she lives in a hostile world, a world that is hostile to gay women, So she's had to, like, become this tough thing, and that it's painful, It's been painful to her. Like, she doesn't want to necessarily be like this, And then this scene where she's like, I want to go to bed with you, and I want to be straight, And she's like, oh, Joey, I can't handle this. And she starts tearing the book Knots into pieces. Like, oh, so this was so dramatic. It was so sad. Like, I felt so much for Joey. And it's crazy how it's like I've barely gotten to know this lady. But then now it's like you see this and you're just like, fuck, like, damn, like, that's some real shit, And, because it's hard to be different, It's fucking hard and it fucking sucks, Like, it's not easy. But this book, in particular, is a book of it's a poem book of language exercises and logic puzzles. I was looking at it online last night, and if you Google it, it's interesting because they have, like, these, like, little circular charts of, like, and you read this, like, and it leads you, like, I was reading online about it on Amazon, and this guy said that it was a unique book. It is meant to make you think as you read and illustrate how many of our relationships are built on assumptions and attitudes which are not necessary or even rational. Read a page and stop to think about which relationship follows which pattern that you just read, And so this is the book that she gave her, is, like, this word puzzle book where it's like, this will help you to kind of figure out that your relationships are all built on assumptions. This is all bullshit, and that it's like she is genuinely trying to help her, but this lady's, like, not at that point. But I really love this. And another thing I loved about this whole deal too is, like, okay, so you have Gloria, so you have Joey and Eileen. They're, like, reconnecting, Then you have Gloria, Dr. Malcolm Long, who was treating Rorschach. She's looking for her man, And then they find each other. And then it's like, and then also Bernard and Bernard, of course. Get to Bernard and Bernard. And then we have Bernard and Bernard, and they're a couple. I mean, they're not a romantic couple, but they're a couple. And then they start connecting for the first time. So you have all these different dualities, all these different couples who are coming to, like, meet each other on this, like, one street corner, almost as if they're being drawn there by magnetism, And it's like, again, it's like knots and triangles and dualities, It's like there's all this stuff in this issue, You got your Gordian knot all over the place. You've got you got this book knots. You have the top knots on the little people. The youth culture top knot stuff. So good. Let's go back to me. Also, there was the two detectives too. Like, I love that the two detectives were also hanging out, and then, like, they're all drawn to this street corner where, like, this massive event is set to take place that none of them know about. But the thing is that, like, there must have been some, like, it's, Alan Moore in that video, that clip that we just saw, talked about synchronicities and coincidences. And it's like, a lot of people, like, I've stopped thinking about coincidence. When I see a coincidental event, instead of going, oh, what a coincidence, I go, oh, synchronicity, Like, I like to come at it from that term. I mean, sometimes shit's just dumb and whatever, but it's like, but I feel like there's a lot to be gained from, like when you see, it's like the Matrix, it's like a glitch in the Matrix. When you see, like, synchronicities, I think, like, it's like the Matrix showing you're going the right way, or it's just showing you shit. Like, I feel like the universe is always trying to talk to you. I feel like it's always trying to talk to you. It's whisper in your ear, but you're just not, like, looking at the right. You don't know how to communicate with it. You don't know the signs and the omens and the symbols. But like, looking at this, it's like, okay, so where there's street corner, where there's this is exactly where the monster is going to be teleported, okay? And moments before it's teleported here, you have all of these characters who have all been in and around this street corner, who have all been connected by this street corner, because they have involvements with the different Watchmen characters. Like Rorschach went to that street corner, you know, like Rorschach went there. Like Dan, like you've seen Dan and Lori even there, I think, at one time. Like I think there was a panel of either Dan or Lori, somebody by that newsstand. Like everyone who has involvements in this plot, and some people that are just there by happenstance, like all get involved in it. And I think it's so fucking cool. I love it because that's how it is. Like, and it's like, and they're all getting antsy and they're fighting, and then they're like, no, we're all gonna love each other. Like, we gotta help these people. And like, it's so perfect too to show, like, at the beginning of this comic in peace times, you see the street corner and you see what a dick the newsman is. You know, he's a dick to this kid. Like, he's kind of like, whatever about Joey, like a weird lesbian, you know, fuck her. He's like, you know, Rorschach, like, what a freak, you know, like, and then it's like, he's such a downer, you know. And then as peace evaporates and as we head towards war, it brings out, like, the best in this guy, you know, and it brings out the best in all these people. Like, even Malcolm Long, when he's talking to Gloria, who's like, you better not go over there and get involved with those other people's problems. Like, I need you to be here with me. And he's like, I can't not anymore. And that's the thing, like, Rorschach affected him, you know, like, he gazed in the abyss stared back, and now he's like, I have to provide my own light. I can't not do something about this, you know, like, that's what we have to do. Like, we kind of have to help each other. Like, that's the whole deal. Like, he's had this big realization. And the cops that were dicks, you know, like the cops that were really like, oh, fuck this, whatever, I see child murder every day, you want to go get lunch, you know, like, he sees, like, two women fighting on the street, and then he's like, no, I've got to, like, get involved in this, I got to stop this, I have to restore order. Like, you have all these people who are trying to, like, restore peace and order in this area where Adrian Veidt is getting ready to restore peace and order, you know, it's just like, fucking so good, so good. Also, another thing I loved about this issue was that the comedian and Ozymandias hate each other. I love that they don't like each other. Like, Ozymandias is talking about how he's like, as intelligent, self-driven men responding to an unhinged world, we were alike and despised each other instantly, you know. And then, like, so they both are like in on it. They're in on the joke, you know. They see, like, how fucking crazy life is, and it's this big weird game that you have to play. They're savvy to it. And they're both just trying their best to deal with being in a really sick, like, spiritually sick world, you know. It's like they're trying to deal with it in their own fucked up weird ways. And they just, I love it. They hate each other. It's like two peacocks, you know. It's like you can't have two of these big egos, you know, in the same room, you know. It's like they like to be the only one in the room, I feel like. And I love that the comedian, like, beat him up, he's like, he knew, like, Ozymandias knew that Blake knew that Ozymandias was not a bad guy in this fight when they met. And yet, because they hated each other, Blake was like, I'm gonna pretend, even though you know that I know that you're fucking not a bad dude, and I'm just gonna fucking beat you up anyways, because I don't give a fuck, you know? Like, and it's just like, that's so ballsy and comedian and crazy and hilarious, and it just makes me love the comedian even more. Like, that's so nuts. And like, Ozymandias is so bitter about it, you know. He's just like, he recognized me and then he went after me, you know. And it's like, oh well, he's also kind of testing you. But then, you know, Ozymandias allowed himself to be tested. He allowed the comedian to, like, fuck him up because he wanted to see what the guy's moves were. And like, that's honestly the best way to, like, figure something out, is like, let yourself get beat up a few times and you'll figure it out real quick, like what people have and who has what, you know. So he lets himself get beat up, but it's still humiliating for him. It's still humiliating for someone who's so vain and is so just like, I'm the world's smartest man, I'm so fucking me, you know. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was really funny. I thought that was really good. I don't know if you guys are into that as much, picked up on that, but, and then, I mean, we'll talk about it later, like, when we do the supplemental, because he talks more about the comedian, and he really, like, tries to sick burn the comedian there, and I was like, oh, shit. But let's go to the book cam. I want to show you. Okay, so we have the two Bernards. They're coming together. I'm Bernard. What the fuck? You know, we're both Bernards, you know, like, we're not that different. Like, you have these two guys, like, he's like, we're not that different. you know, like, we're right by each other. You know, they think they're not that different. But then in the end, when, this last page, oh my god, this last page, you guys, seriously. Okay. So when he teleported it, you know, the sky went blue. Everyone's like, oh shit, you know. And Bernard, seeing that this blast is coming from behind them at the spatial studies place, he instinctively goes to the other Bernard and, like, grabs him, you know, like, grabs the child to protect him and, like, puts himself in the blast zone, you know. And then as they disintegrate in this blast, this psychic blast, they turn into this splotch. And, you know, fun fact, this splotch looks a lot like this splotch. You know, it's like, oh man, you guys, Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons, you guys are killing it. This is so good. And then I just love the last white big panel. It's just like, oh, so good. So good. Silhouettes, I love it. I loved it. I hope you guys loved it as much as I did. So, and yeah, so, okay, so the deal is, though, is like, we do need to take a minute to talk about how the deal is. So Adrian Veidt is like, I'm going to create a monster out of a psychic's brain, which, by the way, the New Frontiersman, that article, the supplemental of the New Frontiersman, when they were talking about all the missing artists, one of the missing people that they talk about was the psychic whose head was removed. They said that this psychic, who is this medium guy, his brain was removed, or his head was removed, and, like, there was some, they thought it was black magic or practical jokers or something. But what it was Adrian. Adrian needed that psychic's brain. And I love that in this universe he calls them sensitives, and that there are people who do have psychic potential. And they took this psychic's brain and they did some cloning, DNA stuff, weird shit with it, and then fused it into this, like, made a monster thing that this woman designed. And then because it was like a living brain thing or something, or not, I don't know. Anyways, they filled this brain filled with these grotesque images, you know, all this, like, imagery and sounds and this, you know, story, like, this fucked up shit, and it's like, that's all the stuff. And then when it was teleported, because he never fixed teleportation, so it exploded, because it's an organic thing. It exploded when it got there, and when it exploded, the brain was like a psychic bomb that goes off, and then it ended up, like, it sent out this psychic shockwave that killed half of New York City instantly. But anyone who was in the blast radius who was not killed by it was bombarded by psychic images of this other dimension, these monsters, like this fucking H.P. Lovecraft shit. You know, they're given, like, cosmic horror images, and sounds and, like, fucked up stuff, you know. And so that is how everyone's like, oh, this is a fucking monster. Like, this is like a fucking monster. This is how we convince everybody this is a real monster. This is a real alien. Yeah, I thought that was just like, wow, Adrian, that's so nuts. Like, that's such a, I love it. And, like, that's the thing that's, like, different in the Zack Snyder film, is that they did not do this monster stuff because that was way too out there for Hollywood. Hollywood's like, no, we're not going to do this. But also, like, in a way, like, the whole thing was, like, under the guise of it being for some Hollywood film or something. And it's like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting that, like, they didn't go that route. But I think, like, I love it. Like, I love it. And that's Hollywood comic book shame right there. It's like, where they're just like, we're not willing to go that far. We're not going to do that. That's too out there. We're going to make it some other bullshit. We're going to make it Dr. Manhattan. Yeah, he was him. It's him, you know? So it's like, yeah, Holly weird. That's for sure. That's why I like having Hollywood adventures. So because I'm a weirdo. But I don't want to live in that shit all the time. So this book ends with, the name also of this issue is Look on My Works Ye Mighty. And so at the end, we have My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair, which is from a poem by Percy Shelley called Ozymandias of the same name. And I want to take a moment to talk about this because this poem is a poem about the impermanence of power. You know, you have in the poem, it's like it describes these ruins, you know, it's these ruins and there's this vast desert, you know, and like inscribed on this, you know, face of this pharaoh, you know, next to this pharaoh's fallen face of his fucking stone head. You have inscribed like, you know, my name is Ozymandias, like look on my works, ye mighty, in despair. But you look around, it's like, what the fuck, bro? There's nothing here, dude. You got punked. You look like a fucking loser. Like you look like a loser right now, Ozymandias. Like you're not even the deal. And it's like at one point, like, yeah, he was so powerful, but how time has eroded his kingdom and that he's no more, and that, you know, it's like he's nothing to us now, you know. And I think it's interesting that Ozymandias takes... Well, okay, here's another thing, though. Okay, so Ozymandias is the name for Ramses II. Okay, Ramses II was a pharaoh. And, like, when this pharaoh was, like, in Egypt doing it, he was, like, one of the most successful pharaohs. Okay, he brought, like, 33 years of peace and prosperity. He secured the borders, you know, like, everything was chill. Like, he kept everything on lock. And the Egyptians had like so much prosperity. I think maybe one of their peaks of prosperity during his reign. Okay, so here's the thing: is like, I mean, even though you could say that like, oh fuck you, Ozymandias, Ramses II, you know, oh look on you works, but at the same time, it's like, dude actually really did do some stuff though. I mean, like for real, like it doesn't make now nobody cares, but like. Back then, it was a huge fucking deal. You know, it was a huge fucking deal. And so, so I feel like, okay, so Ozymandias took the name Ozymandias, which is the Greek name for Ramses II, which is, you know, also the name of this poem. And I think that he kind of, because he said, like, he crowns himself, you know, he has a little, and I love that he crowns himself. He's such a fucking cunt. Like, he crowns himself with this circlet, you know, and he's like, I'm going to take Ozymandias' name and Alexander the Great's freebooting style. I like that he said freebooting style, by the way. That was like, I need to say freebooting style, like, way more in my life. Like, I hope somebody says, like, yes, I'm going to take Comic Book Girl's freebooting style. Like, what a hilarious, like, way, an adjective. It's my favorite. But, so even though he's inspired by Alexander the Great, like, why didn't he take the name Alexander the Great or some shit? But he takes Ozymandias, and I think that part of the reason why he took it is to try to remind himself of the impermanence of power, you know, as kind of a reminder to himself that, like, maybe he's not, like, no matter what he does, like, now, like, and he may do a lot of cool shit and, like, really make the world a prosperous place, but at some point, like, his contributions are going to mean nothing, like, in the future. No one's gonna know his name, and, like, nobody's gonna fucking care. So maybe he's doing it as a way to kind of, like, check himself, you know, as, like, you know, because you're attaching the name Ozymandias, which is, like, the name of this which also, fun fact, and this is really ironic, so Percy Shelley, poet, married to Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. He was part of, like, he was friends with, like, Lord Byron and, like, all these other dudes. Like, these guys were to go to a Percy Shelley Lord Byron party, you know what I'm saying? Like, can you imagine hanging out with those motherfuckers? Like, oh, it must have been so great. Anyways, he makes this sonnet, and he made it with a friend of his. His friend has also made another poem. They're, like, kind of racing each other, I guess, as it were. A lot of these guys like to compete. That's how Frankenstein came about. They were competing to write the best, you know, story in a night. And so his friend's poem obviously sucks and nobody's ever heard of it. The only reason anyone's heard of it is because of Percy Shelley's poem was so fucking good that it has lasted and become his most popular poem. You know, it is absolutely his most popular poem, in my opinion. And it's hilarious that, like, his poem about the impermanence of power is his most enduring poem. that's kept his name like out there the longest. Like we might not be talking about Percy Shelley right now if he hadn't have fucking written Ozymandias, you know, and he wrote "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." You know, it's like I don't know, it's funny. I think it's really cute. I think it's really funny. It's like life is such a funny, weird joke, you know, where you're like, I'm going to write a poem about the power or the impermanence of power. And then that is like a really powerful poem that's been super like, I mean, it's not permanent, but like, it's like it's so funny. Like, I love it. I love it. Okay. So let's go to the supplemental After the Masquerade. Let's talk about this for a minute. First of all, okay, this fucking shit had me cracking up so hard. Like, look at this fucking loser. He's like, he's posed like David, like the statue of David. Did you notice that? Like, he's like which is supposed to be like the perfect man, you know, proportions. Like, he's posed in that same fucking pose. And this is for his like cool guy interview called After the Masquerade, you know. And also, if you notice, this is by Doug Roth. This is by the guy who wrote the Dr. Manhattan expose. This is in Nova Express. This is a Nova Express publication, which, by the way, Veet fucking owns. Okay, he's like doing an interview and they're acting like, oh, we got an interview with him. We're so lucky. This bitch owns this thing. Like, he's doing this shit on purpose, you know? And then this is what he chooses to do. He's like, I want to make sure I look really good. Like, here, check out my awesome shit. I don't know. I'm a peacock, so like I see it when other people do this. Like, I have a little bit of Ozymandias in me, like a little bit. Like, I think a lot of us do. A lot of us type A overachiever psychopath motherfuckers have that shit. And so I see exactly what he's doing because like I do this shit. So anyways, and then also it's so funny too. If you look down here, it's so crazy. They even have they went to the fucking trouble to make this look so realistic that they put photo credit courtesy of Triangle Inc. Copyright 19 da da da. So they have a copyright for this fucking photo, you know. And also Triangle Inc. Oh, you think that the photographers, like, fucking, of course, like, he owns Triangle Inc. It's another pyramid thing. Like, you know, it's fucking, look for his stupid pyramid boners, you know, and there you go. It leads you back to him. It's like, oh, courtesy of this corporation, which he also owns, you know, which took pictures of him. I thought that was really good. But yeah, his high fashion pose with his cat was really funny. Although I will say, I do like that Veet is a kitty cat man. I love that Veet's a kitty cat man because I'm a kitty cat man. I love kitty cats. You know what I'm saying? He's got a cat, and so you know, that was another thing. Like, I don't know. I feel like I can deal with that. But I love that. Like, okay, so in this interview, the interviewer, Doug Roth, talks about how all his girlfriends, like, he's like, every single one of my girlfriends, like, want to lay this guy. Like, every girlfriend I've ever had has always talked about, like, how Ozymandias is some sexual fantasy for them, you know? And then it's like, God, this is such an article building him up, you know? This is such an article, like, about, like, how fucking great Ozymandias is. The thing about Ozymandias is that he knows that it's wrong to brag about himself. Like, he knows that it's morally wrong to brag about yourself, but then, like, he's going to these links to brag about himself, but, like, cover it up, and then he's putting his other stuff in there, but he's like, he's totally bragging about himself. And then so they talk about how he, like, comes up to him, and he's like, oh, not the kind of snow you're used to in California, huh? You know? And then he's like, oh my God, Adrian Veet made a Coke joke. You know, this guy made a fucking a drugs joke to me. And so, I mean, you see how, like, Ozymandias comes off as, like, super charming, because it's like he knows exactly what to say. And the thing is like, Ozymandias does not do coke, you know, like, he does not do that shit. He's fucking crazy. He does not party. This guy has, like, zero fucking party fun time, dude. But, you know, he's, like, wants to make this guy, like, feel like it's cool, like, he's on his level, you know. And so, like, one thing, like, instant ways to bond with people. It's like, one of them is to, like, share food, you know, and another one is to, like, share drugs. But in this way, like, they're not actually sharing drugs, but they're sharing, like, the joke of, like, drugs are a thing and it's okay and I'm aware of these things and I'm not this perfect person. It's like, I don't know, he reminds me of Amy Dunn. He reminds me of Amy Dunn from Gone Girl. He's got that Gone Girl shit going on. It's hilarious. It's hilarious to me. But then, okay, so I love how revealing this interview is, because he says, like, in the end, like, okay, there's a few things that really give him away as, like, a piece of shit, where he's saying, like, ordinary person, there's a notion I'd like to see buried, the ordinary person, ridiculous, there is no ordinary person, you know, and it's like, oh man, he can't stand the idea of being an ordinary fucking piece of shit. He just can't stand it. Like, he can't stand the idea so much that he can't even admit that other people are ordinary, you know, he's like, no, which, again, it's like, I get that, like, I totally feel that a little bit, and then, like, I love later he says, I guess I've just reached a point where I've started to wonder whether all the grandstanding and fighting individual evils does much good for the world as a whole. Those evils are just symptoms of an overall sickness of the human spirit, and I don't believe you can cure a disease by suppressing its symptoms. That whole Contact 400 approach is to our society's problems. I despair of it. It doesn't work. And then, like, God, when I read that in the interview, I was like, fuck, I love you. Like, now I love you. It's like, oh, I hate you, but I love you. Like, I totally agree with that shit. Like, I'm just like, yeah, this is kind of just how I feel, like, right now, like, about our world. Like, oh my gosh, like, that okay, so Contact 400, BT dubs, is, like, this cold drug, this cold medicine that was used in the 80s. And it was, like, it was said to suppress your cold or flu for, like, 12 hours. Like, it would give you 12 hours to do whatever you need to do before you died and turn into a flu person or a cold person. And that is something that's, like, total bullshit, you know, and that's what we do a lot, especially in our Western society and the way our Western medicine works. It's all about, like, oh, what are your symptoms? Let me deal with the symptoms instead of dealing with the overall fucking problem, which is, like, a sickness, you know, and it's like, I love that he said that we have a spiritual sickness, you know, and it's just like, that's the thing, you know, he is super smart, and he's so smart that he's able to see the humanity's spiritual sickness, and it just disgusts him, you know, it's just like, it's just disgusting to him, you know, because you just see how stupid it is, and you're just like, I despair of it, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I totally get that. And then he goes on, I like the other thing he said, he says, he sees me as an he's talking about, okay, here we go, back to him talking shit about the comedian, where the guy's, like, pressing him on it. The interview's pressing him on, like, why aren't you and the comedian friends? He's trying to get some dirt, trying to get him to spill some tea. And he says, you know, the comedian sees me as an intellectual dilettante, dabbling in national affairs that don't concern me. I see him as an amoral mercenary, allying himself to whatever political faction seems to grant him the greatest license. And it's just like, oh, he's like, simple as that. Like, that's how I see this bitch. You know, it's like, ooh, like, I see him as, let's just go over this one more time. I see him as an amoral mercenary, allying himself to whatever political faction seems to grant him the greatest license, which is 100% true. 100% true. But the thing is like, he's offended that the comedian views him as an intellectual dilettante, which is like somebody who just, like, doesn't really care. They're just like, they're a dabbler. He's just a dabbler. He doesn't really give a fuck. He doesn't really know what's going on. He's just this lives in the world of ideas, doesn't know reality, you know, and he needs to just, like, get out of the way, little boy, you know, get out of the way, you fucking intellectual weirdo. Like, you don't know how the real world works. And the thing is like, these men are two ends of the same spectrum, you know. For me, as a woman, when I look at these two dudes, what I see is two motherfuckers who are going to do whatever the fuck they want, no matter what. Like, that's what these two guys, like, these guys, like, both the comedian and Ozymandias are both very potent, very powerful men, and they do not like being told what to do, and they will not do whatever you ask them to do, and they're going to do whatever the fuck they want because they don't give a fuck. You know, and both of those dudes are trouble. The only difference between them is one is a order daddy and one of them is a chaos daddy. You know, you got Ozymandias who's like, order, and I have to look like this perfect person, and I am the perfect PR, and I have the businessman and the money, and I have this, I made a fucking jungle, and, like, all this shit, you know. He has all these rules, you know, all these rules, like, I don't do the wrong thing, I do everything that I'm supposed to do, because I know that I'm fucked up, and I'm like, I'm watching all this shit, so I'm just gonna, like, play by the rules, you know, and then whereas the comedian is, like, chaos, like, 24/7, you know, he's just like, freedom, dude, I'm just do whatever the fuck I want, like, I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks, I'm gonna do what I want, you know, like, I'm gonna do what I want, I don't give a fuck, like, that's that's his whole thing, and that's why and that's the spectrum, you know? It's like, we gotta think of things on, like, people on just spectrums, you know? You have the chaos on one end of the spectrum, you have order on the other end of the spectrum, you know? I feel like that's a really good way to kind of think about things, you know? I've been thinking about things in that way of, like, duality of, like, oh, who's more leaning towards order, who's more chaos, because then it helps you, like, find that balance, because the thing is you don't want to be too far on either side. You kind of want to be in the middle. I mean, we're all always going to have our own little, you know, we're all on different areas, but for yourself, whatever you are, you got to find the middle of whatever you are. Yeah. Well, you know, okay, Ben David says laws on the top, chaos on the bottom. Wrong. I would not think about it in terms of on top and on bottom. I would think of it in terms of left and right, because it's neutral. There's not one thing that's better than the other. Order is not better than chaos. And chaos is not better than order. They're the same. They're two sides of the same coin that's necessary for everything in existence, you know? Everything around you. Like, everything, the fact that we're talking is, like, all a product of chaos and order. So, yeah. All right. Both of these guys have no chill. That's the deal. All right, so now we are going to, before we get into our next issue, we're going to play another clip